This conference will now be recorded.
Well, will you be able to do that, Robin?
Yes, I'm working on it right now, so sorry, hold on. I had um I had it and now I can't find it. Oh, funny.
Well, while you're looking for that, I'll get started. I'm Kellene Vaile, and I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I lived out in Utah for over 16 years, almost 20 years if you count my mission. I got to serve the last part of my mission in for the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints in the Utah Ogden area, and I loved it. I also got to live in Provo, or Salt Lake area, and worked in Provo, I should say. When I lived in Utah for about 16 years, I lived mostly in Orem and a little bit in Vernal. So I miss the mountains, but I love my green in Ohio. I just got to say, and I love my Buckeyes. So, all right. So now all of you have hung up, right? All right. Anyway, I've been teaching preparedness now. This marks my 15th year of teaching preparedness. I come about things a little bit differently, though. I'm not one of those gloom and doomers. I know that there are real things out there that are horrible, that are happening, and I just stay focused on my everyday preparedness, so that when those horrible things might throw a curveball at me, I can handle that. Because if you're prepared for the everyday curveballs, then you're going to be prepared for the big ones too. Because the everyday ones tend to be a little bit more real to us. All right, so good. I can share when I'm ready. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, thanks so much. So what I'm best known for is just common sense approach to preparedness. I don't teach the survivalist mindset, but having a preparedness mindset is very important. You have to be willing to take personal responsibility for what happens, and I believe in living our lives deliberately. Well, with preparedness, you get more control over being able to live your life deliberately. And so that's what I teach, and I specifically do it through what's called the 10 principles of preparedness, and that's what I'm going to share here, I hope. Let's see, share, there we go, ta-da, it worked, yay! I love it when technology works. All right, so the 10 principles of preparedness. This is what is involved in your life through every preparedness scenario, every disaster scenario, every crisis scenario in one way or another. It's not just 10 things, it's 10 prioritized components of a crisis. So whether you may sail through some of these, but in order of prioritization, this is exactly the order in which you hit them. This was created through a lot of research. And before some of you shake your head and go, she's missing bullets, or she's missing security, trust me, I'm not. I'm not missing any of it. I have gone over this again and again and again and again, and looked and researched over 900 different crises scenarios. And every single crises scenario has these components in this particular order of prioritization. I keep trying to tweak it and go, well, maybe this does need to be improved. And every time I do, it just keeps coming back to this. So I'm going to go over these 10 principles, and the foundation of the principles, first and foremost, is spiritual. What I'd like to do is I'd like to give you a real life scenario of a crisis that I was in. In fact, when I was in Utah, I was taking my sister back to the airport on Christmas Eve, coming up by 15 in a blizzard. And I was driving plenty slow to have room for the cars in front of me, and if they were going to slide, what have you. And just taking things nice and easy. And I was raised to drive in the snow, so I wasn't freaking out or anything. And sure enough, several cars in front of me, there was a car that hit another car. So I was in the far lane, the fast lane on I-15, where I belong. And I started slowing down, nice and slow. And I didn't even come close to hitting the car in front of me. I still had a good 12 inches when I came to a complete stop, nice slow stop, but that car had already hit the car in front of it. Unfortunately, the car behind me though wasn't playing that nice slow let's pretend that there's actually ice on the road game. And so that car hit me quite hard. Unfortunately, when it hit me, it caused me to spin around into the other lane, and those cars weren't playing the nice and safe game either. And so I was hit again in that lane and knocked against the divider when that happened. All told, I was hit 3 times in our car. The airbags went off immediately how they were supposed to. I was just afraid because I couldn't see anything in with the airbags up because they were up both front and side. I just was afraid. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know when another car was going to hit me. It was a little bit stressful. So as soon as I stopped being knocked around and it seemed I could hear that the traffic had stopped around me, I started going through the process. Okay, am I all right? I guess I'm not going to die. And I got to tell you, I specifically thought while I was driving and I got hit the first time, I almost let loose a swear word, but I was afraid that if I died, that would be the last word on my mouth, and that I didn't want to face the Lord with that. So I'm happy to say that no swear word came out of my mouth. I was pretty proud of myself, even under stressful circumstances. And then the next thing I did is try to get my bearings around me. Okay, which way are we facing? I cut away the airbags so that I could see. And the next is to make sure that we were okay. Physical, check. Then medical, check. My sister was really freaked out. She had been hit pretty good. I had been hit pretty good. But other than that, we were fine. There wasn't any blood. The broken glass didn't hit us, etc. Now, it's cold. The heater's off. The car's not working anymore. So I quickly grabbed a blanket from behind the back seat, gave that to my sister, told her to stay put. And I went out to get my bearings and see what was going on, and I told her to go ahead and just to stay put. Now, I guarantee you that at no point through these first few minutes of the wreck did I call for Domino's to deliver, or did I see if DoorDash could deliver Krispy Kreme donuts. And yet, if I mention the name preparedness or the word preparedness, usually the first response that I get from people is, oh, well, I have my weed, or, oh yeah, we do food storage, or I need to work on my food storage. Almost 99% of the time, people are always talking about food when we're talking about preparedness. And yet, in order of prioritization, that's number 8. Now, fortunately, we never got to number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 in that scenario. We only had to go through number 4, medical. We were taken to the hospital. My car was towed away. All was well and good. Thank goodness we didn't need 6, 7, 8, 9. And then finally, the last thing I thought of is, oh yeah, let's call my husband and make sure that he knows. That was back when I was married. So there's a real life scenario in which the principles and the prioritization thereof came into play. Now, here's the thing. When you put things in their proper prioritization, you emphasize them properly, both mentally, spiritually, emotionally, financially. I see a lot of people spending a whole lot of money on prioritization number 8 without any acknowledgement of prioritization number 1, number 2, number 3. What good does it do to have a bug out bag if you're not in enough shape to carry it? That's principle number 3, physical preparedness. What good does it do to have a CB radio if you don't have the mental preparedness and the skill set and the know-how to operate it? I teach firearms self-defense for women primarily. And we're very serious about it. I was the highest certified female NRA instructor in the Western States for several years. And I only taught women. And when I would get a call from, one of the calls was from a bank. Hey, I'd like you to come in and teach my gals. We have all female tellers. I'd like you to come in and teach them some moves. Well, I'm sorry, sir. I can't do that. It'd be a nice contract, it'd be a nice gig, but I can't do that in an hour, because the mental aspect of that self-defense is going to be much more important than any move. You have people who have studied for years in martial arts, and yet when push comes to shove, when they get attacked, they are unable to utilize what they have learned in martial arts. Law enforcement officers, they are trained specifically now to in acknowledgement of the fact that they can be 7 feet away from somebody who's shooting at them, and they shoot back and they still miss. And part of that is because of a lack of the mental preparedness component. I hate to admit this, but I watched a reality show. It was a long time ago, guys. I have repented. I've never watched it again. It's called I'm so embarrassed. Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Okay. So I was watching this, and it was just one of those late nights, and I couldn't sleep, and I was flipping through, and I'm watching these girls pay this astronomical amount of money to go to this spa for a mani-pedi. But it wasn't just any spa. It was a pedicure in which you put your feet in the water, and these little fish, and I know there's a proper term for it, but I'm just watching it from my end. These little fish are chewing off the dead skin from your feet. Well, these very wealthy and, decent head on their shoulders for business are sitting there, and they've paid for this experience, right? But they are freaking out and screeching and squealing, and not in delight. They're freaking out at the experience because these little fishies are biting on their feet. My first thought when I saw that was, oh, girlfriend, let's hope that you never get stuck in an earthquake or an elevator, or that the groceries are not out when you go to shop for them, because you're going to lose your ever-loving mind. There was such a malleability and such a weakness in their mental preparedness. So, and that's not meant to disparage that person, but that was an example of we need to be mentally prepared. We actually need to put ourselves through some scenarios that mentally that are going to help us to be better prepared for what might come. So I've been editing a lot of articles lately on my blog, which is preparednesspro.com. If you want to go there, there's tons and tons and tons of articles covering all the 10 principles of preparedness. And I was editing a bunch of articles because we've got some broken links, and we've got some whacked out links too that go to places I don't want them to go. And I came across an article that I had written 9 years ago, and it was about a pandemic scenario. And lo and behold, it was about a stay in place pandemic scenario. Now, even then, when I was mentally putting my readers through what, here's what you might run into, and this is just the little things you need to be prepared for. Even then, I did not anticipate a run on toilet paper. There being a shortage of toilet paper, and suddenly being the wealthiest woman on the block because of my toilet paper storage. But my point is by mentally putting yourself through some paces, you're better in control of what's being thrown at you. So these are just some tidbits, some little examples. Now I'd actually like to get in to the 10 principles of preparedness. And, we're just a small group here. There's just 23 of you. So I'm more than happy to answer questions that might come up as you come along. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to dig down deep, a little deeper in each one of these principles. And I can't go too deep because the time that we've got. And where did my clock go? I have to use my other one here because I want to make sure I keep an eye on time. It's almost 9:30 here. So if I start falling asleep on y'all, you know why. All right. So for starters, spiritual preparedness. Am I being all churchy and preachy about spiritual preparedness? No. Because the fact of the matter is that no matter how well prepared you are, I don't care if you're ham radio certified. I don't care if you were trained by Chuck Norris himself. I don't care if you have a 10-year savings account. Enough money in your savings account to get you by through 10 years. You have all the food, all the water, any fuel that you need, clothing, shelter. You've got the fanciest bug out bunker on the planet. At some point, something is going to happen that you aren't prepared for. Case in point, one of my dear friends was in Hawaii a few years ago. Early when all of a sudden she got a text message on her phone, and it was an alert from the emergency alert system saying that a missile was inbound. She's a good preparedness-minded person. But can you imagine how she felt at that moment with her aged mother and her 2 young kids? And there was nothing else to do. So she did the only thing that she could do. She just relied on her faith, on all the years of that faith that's been strengthened, because spiritual preparedness is not something that you can buy at a weekend workshop. It's got to take time, and it has to be certain, because in times like that, talk about uncertainty. So you can imagine what those 15 minutes to 30 minutes were like for that family. The only principle of preparedness that mattered was spiritual preparedness, your values, your belief system, your convictions. That's what's going to help. I thought that I was prepared for just about everything under the sun. And if anybody that knew me would tell you that I was, they adored myself and my husband at the time. And everything was honky-dory. I was the preparedness pro. But then all of a sudden, my marriage didn't exist anymore. My partner decided he didn't want to be married anymore. He didn't want to believe the same way I believed anymore. And he just up and left on Christmas Eve. Never in a million years would I have expected that to happen. So imagine what prioritization, I should say, which prioritization I had to dig down for in order to get through that experience. Mental, spiritual, so important there. Okay, any questions on spiritual preparedness? You'll see that it actually carries out through everything. That's why it's not just the foundation, but it's all encompassing with the other principles. All right, mental preparedness. Mental preparedness is your mental fortitude. It's knowledge, it's know-how. I have a lot of people that buy great gadgets, and I mean great gadgets, and they'll get it and they'll go, oh, great, and they kind of pat themselves on the back or their little shopping list, and then they put it away, and then lo and behold, something happens and they have no idea where it is. When I was living in Utah, my neighborhood did a 72-hour trial run emergency, and we had a lot of people that were really great and committed to it. And the most interesting feedback that we got after the fact was that they didn't know where their sleeping bags were. They didn't know where those batteries were. They didn't know how to operate their solar oven. A lot of it was all about mental preparedness. A lot of times I hear people say, I really wish that I had enough money to be prepared. And I always respond back, then start focusing on the 3 principles, the most important principles that don't require money. We have libraries. We still have libraries. We have the internet. We can get our spiritual preparedness, our mental preparedness, and our physical preparedness without money involved. But that mental preparedness, the most important component of that is fortitude. Education is combined in mental preparedness as well. I got back into the dating world. I just really wasn't interested in it until last October. I've been divorced about 5 years now. And I decided, okay, I'm going to get back into the dating world, and I am going to go on a date. So I went on a date with a gentleman, asked me out, that I had met online. So I'm doing all the right things, met at a public place, gave my information to my girlfriend so that she'd know where I was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the date didn't go so well. And I'm not trying to horrify anybody, because I just don't feel that way about it. But the date did not go so well. Let's just say some people have a hard time understanding the word no. Now, it got to the point where I was really starting to get scared. And then all of a sudden, thankfully, and only thankfully to this, my mental preparedness started kicking in. And without even thinking about it, I'm 5'2.5", and this person was 6'4". I ended up having to do a throat punch. Now, I'm not saying that to brag in any way, shape, or form, but I don't even know how I landed that, because I'm 5'2.5" and he's 6'4". And it got his attention, and everything was good, and I just drove home and I was fine. my point is that mental preparedness, that mental rehearsal is just as important, because otherwise some of the behaviors that we need to do, they wouldn't come naturally. You brush your teeth without thinking of it. Ladies, you can put on your mascara without looking in the mirror. I mean, you can do it if you really tried, because you've done it so many times. We tie our shoes without thinking about it. That's mental preparedness. I don't know if some of you are aware, but at 9/11, there were actually fire marshals assigned to each office, and there were chief fire marshals assigned to each floor. Every fire marshal in an office had a specific job that they were supposed to do. There was one woman in particular that I know her story. She was actually in the World Trade Center when it was bombed earlier. What was that, 86? Yes, I believe so. And so here she is, she got stuck in the elevator during that bombing incident. So they assigned her to check the elevators in the event of a crisis. She was so fragile still, and some of that mental preparedness, even though you have to understand, when the people were coming down the stairs, they didn't know what was going on. They probably would have freaked out, and probably would have been worse if they had known what was going on. But they didn't understand, so many of them, what was going on. They were just making their way nice and slow and calm down the stairs. Her job was to check the elevators, and ironically, she didn't check the elevators. She was so focused on her normalcy bias, what we call normalcy bias. She kept trying to normalize the situation, and every flight, that situation would be blown to bits, and she'd realize, oh, well, that's not what's going on. And so she'd come up with yet another normal situation. Even when she's outside and she can see the chaos, her mind was still trying to normalize. Well, let me just, I'll speed this up. When they did the aftermath report of all of these fire marshals and whether or not they had performed their duties, out of 90 that they interviewed, only 3 had performed their duties. Some of them said they didn't even know where the stairwell was. And it wasn't because these weren't good people, didn't want to do something good in a crisis. They had never taken time to practice. They had never run any drills of any sort. Well, running drills and practice is really important for mental fortitude. That's the only reason why this under tall, overweight, and out of shape girl was able to land a throat punch on a 6'4" guy. It is only because of practice, lots of practice. Okay, physical. Well, there's so much involved with physical, but physical not only has to do with your physical health, but it also is your physical and your environment, your safety, your security. So physical and security is in the physical component. And I think people really underestimate the health that they need for physical. I can't stand working out. It just has never been joyful for me. I like to do physical activities, but I don't like working out for working out's sake. And that's what I've been relegated to because of COVID. But I still do it because I know that there's going to be physical rigor that's going to be required in event of something more serious. And it doesn't even have to be more serious. It could be something as simple as the 4 inches of snow that I have to go out and shovel. I don't want to be a burden on someone else who has their own life crises, who has their own duties and obligations and responsibilities and stresses. I want to be able to shovel my own snow. So the only reason why I focus on that physical fitness for myself is because of the preparedness. Now, with that is also physical self-defense, being able to defend ourselves. Mental has to come first. You've got to mentally get yourself in the right place. But then that physical comes into play. And most of us, we wouldn't even know what to do in a scenario. And again, that's really, really important. I had a very, very dear girlfriend recently who was assaulted. And 12 years ago, she actually taught, for 3 years, she actually taught up until 12 years ago, rape prevention. Unfortunately, she's had some health crises, and she really let herself get out of shape. And even though she knew what to do in this assault, she said the biggest fear that she had is that she wouldn't be able to endure it was only a minute and a half of an assault, but it was the longest minute and a half. So one of the things that I do when I'm doing my self-defense classes is I make the attendees bring a pillow, and I want them to pound the living daylights out of that pillow for 90 minutes. And most of them start fizzling out at me after 24 or 90 minutes. I didn't mean 90 minutes, sorry, 90 seconds. Now that would be great. No, most of them fizzle out at me at 24 seconds. That's how weak we are if we had to defend ourselves. The same with most of us don't have to haul a bug out bag. We don't even think about hauling things like that. We think, I haul groceries. I haul the kids everywhere. But have you carried that bug out bag? And how far do you think you could carry it? Those are the kinds of things to be mindful of. Does anybody have any questions on these first three? If you did, I can't even see. I'm sorry. I can't even see where they're. Oh, there they are. Okay, we're good. No questions. Okay, cool. Technology and I do not get along. It's my nemesis. Okay, next is medical preparedness. There isn't much that I'm going to go into there, except that we have to have alternative methods of medical preparedness. Here's something interesting. The majority of the bankruptcies that occur to persons 55 and older do not come about because of a financial crisis. They come about because of a medical crisis or even a physical crisis. They took their health too loosely. They just didn't take it very seriously. That's the wonderful thing about our bodies. They're so amazing, and they function even under stress and duress. And so we don't always recognize that there's a snafu in our health until it becomes a crisis scenario. But if we take care of our health now and we focus on whole food nutrition, somebody says that they can't hear, but I haven't touched anything. Is there any other problem on hearing? Okay, thank you. Great, thanks, Robin. I don't even remember where I was, but whole food nutrition. That's really important. That's one thing that I'm a real big stickler on when I teach my classes is whole food nutrition. 1984, a Jolly Green Giant company did a soil analysis of the nutrients actually found in the soil. Because if it's not in the soil, folks, that your food's grown in, it's not in your food either. And at that point, they found only an 86% nutrition value of what they just assumed was 100%. That's 1984. Can you imagine how much more depleted the nutrients in your soil is today? So nutrients are vital to us one way or the other. We're not getting it in our food anymore. Even if you went whole food, organic, you'd have to be meticulous, and even then you would not get all the nutrients that you need. Our bodies are meant to function with nutrition, but quality nutrition. So the problem that I find, though, is that when people take vitamins, I mean, that makes sense. I can't get the nutrition in my food, so I'm going to take vitamins. Well, here's the problem. Most vitamins use a synthetic alternative. Now, it'll say bioidentical, which means it was made to be identical in a lab. But there's a big difference on how your body will absorb something that's synthetic versus how it will absorb whole food. There are whole food nutrition manufacturers. There's not very many that have that value, but I would strongly suggest that you look for the whole food nutrition. It's going to make a world of difference. Have a big long story that I could share with you about that, but let's just put it this way. When you consume a synthetic, you are consuming a pharmaceutical grade nutrient. There, enough said. Having enough medication on hand that you need. Now, a lot of people say yes, but what about insulin or what about XYZ? That's going to be a personal issue. I could talk to each person individually, and we can usually find solutions of ways that they can, everything from getting stocked up, consulting with their doctor. I have a nice supply of any medication that I need. I wasn't worried even if I couldn't go to the pharmacy when COVID started, because I've over the years, I always fill my prescription a little bit early, and it's added up over time. Rotation, that's really important too on our medical supplies, even something as simple as a Band-Aid, because even the adhesive will wear off. But think in terms of, especially when it comes to medical, think in terms of actually helping other people when it comes to medical. You're going to be glad that you did, but definitely start looking at alternative methods. Now, here's something else with medical. We don't usually think of gardening when it comes to medical, but informing ourselves of what we can grow that would help us medicinally in a pinch if we couldn't get to a doctor. Knowing what's serious and what's not serious. Just your basic Boy Scout first aid would be so valuable in the medical aspect. Okay, clothing and shelter. This is where the majority of security is, because this is your environment. You're sheltering your body, or you're sheltering your environment. Having alternative methods of shelter, something as simple as having a whole bunch of duct tape and tarps, so that if you didn't have electricity and it was in the middle of winter, you closed off the area of the home that you had to heat. So you could consolidate everybody into, let's say, 2 rooms, and then run your heater. This is where you're going to be focusing on extra. I always have an extra pair of shoes in the trunk. I have extra clothing. I have an extra coat in the trunk. Gloves. Shelter is the same kind of thing. You're looking for shelter options. You're looking to make sure that your shelter is secure. Something as simple as, I don't know why people keep their garden tools right outside the windows of their home. If I was a burglar, I'd go, whew, thanks. That's all I need is that big old hoe or that big old shovel to break through your window. Paying attention to that shelter security is really important. And I consult people to actually practice walking through their home in the dark on purpose, so that you have the advantage over a home intruder. What are you going to do if there is a home intruder? Have you actually gone through that? Have you actually practiced that? I know exactly where I'm going if I hear a sound that doesn't sound right. I've literally practiced clearing my home. Something as simple as to where you hang your photographs. You have the glass there, and the glass will reflect things. Well, I hang my photographs very deliberately. I mean, I like them aesthetically, but I also hang them very deliberately as well. And I know when to look at, I know which angles I can look at those glass photographs and what they're going to reflect around a corner that normally somebody wouldn't think to see. Mirrors are the same way. You guys are professionals with the preparedness. I don't need to go into greater detail about clothing or shelter. Fuel, that's simply, you have your cooking fuel, you have your environmental control fuel, all those different capacities that you need to control your environment. That's critical, and that's what fuel is covering. Because without the fuel, then number 7 principle is going to be compromised. Without fuel, your water wouldn't necessarily be drinkable. You wouldn't be able to cook without fuel. Couldn't even boil water. So I'm not going to go into great detail on fuel. Are there any questions with those first 6? Nope, we're good. Okay. Water. I'd say that this is the number 1 mistake or overlooked aspect of preparedness for most people. Everyone is so blasé about their water. They just turn a faucet on and they expect the water to come out. A lot of folks are, well, I don't have enough room to store water. Fine, don't store your supply of water, but good night, could you at least have a week's worth of water? Let's start with a week, and then let's build up to a month, and then let's build up to 6 months. Do what you can with where you are and make the best of it. Not just water, but water filtration. You can't assume that the water is drinkable. We've all seen Flint, Michigan happen. We all saw the footage of Hurricane Katrina. Water also is going to be necessary for some of your medical, so you do need to keep that in mind as well. A lot of people underestimate how much water that they would actually need on a daily basis in a crisis. One of the things that people underestimate is the power of water to their health. Your body, the organ that demands water the most is your brain. Your brain gets first dibs when you consume water. That's really important to keep yourself healthy and well and focused. A lot of us have Coca-Cola addictions or something in that arena. What they don't realize though is if you got off that caffeine and instead used water to fuel your brain, you'd actually have better success. I know it, been there, done it, pulled all nighters with it, etc. um, I'm not teaching you anything that you don't know. I'm just teaching you about the principles, just to be clear here. Next is going to be food. With food, not only do we have what we need to eat, but we need the supplies so that we can actually prepare the food. The number one mistake that I think that people make with food is that they just buy it and store it. One of the ways that I really like to, how do I want to say this, lessen the stress of food preparedness is to make it about what they're already eating. If you're eating your famous $1 million spaghetti recipe, fine, then convert that to something that's shelf stable. Cream cheese is shelf stable. There's freeze dried cream cheese out the wazoo. The spaghetti sauce can be canned. The pasta can be stored. And you know how many servings that dish makes. So calculate your food preparedness in servings instead of in pounds. Instead of, I need 720 pounds a week. That sounds so overwhelming. But do it in terms of servings instead, not servings that they say on the cans. This is 4 servings, and you know darn well you could eat that whole can yourself, and you have. But based on what your habits are, what your history is. There's so many dishes out there that are easily shelf stable. Technology has come a long ways. We have so much better nutrition with freeze-dried foods, and the industry is catering to it. All the wholesale boxes cater to that as well. Right now, finding powdered milk is really, really hard to find. But guess what? I found one of my top 3 favorite powdered milks in stock on the Home Shopping Network. And it was actually a wicked good price. In fact, you can still find it there, by the way. It's the, oh, crumb, what's it called? It was made by Augustin Farms, but Augustin Farms is called something else now. But it's Country Fresh. Lo and behold, it's available on the Home Shopping Network. And hey, you can even divide it in 4 payments if you need to. My point is with food is make it about what your family does. Don't make it about what some website says you need. Start with a week and then go to 3 months and then go to a year. Believe it or not, you can actually fit enough food for a family, for one person in the footprint size of a twin bed. And I've been there and I've done it, and it's realistic and it's actually good food. One of the things that I do when I base my food preparedness on serving sizes is I keep the ingredients for a recipe in 4-gallon square buckets. So for example, I have a 4-gallon square bucket that says beef stroganoff. And in that 4-gallon square bucket is enough food to make that recipe 3 times. That's about what I can fit in that bucket. So let's just say your honey comes home and he says, hey, honey, what's for dinner? And all you have to do is look at your buckets and go, okay, well, the beef stroganoff, that's what we're going to have tonight. I actually make a copy of the recipe and I put it on the inside of the lid of the bucket, because what if I'm the one that's sick with COVID or whatever pandemic of the day that I might come across. I want to make it easy peasy for somebody else to make. Let's see. Next is financial. I think this is the one that we're most under threat with right now, but even that, if that's the case, I still tell my clients not to panic on the financial aspect, not to go overboard on the financial aspect. Get out of debt. I mean, this is nothing that we don't already know. Get out of debt, have 6 months supply of savings, and then have alternative financial options for yourself, for your family. A lot of people, is what I meant to say. A lot of people forget one key component about financial, and that is to have a financial avenue that's self-sufficient. A lot of us have regular jobs. We work the traditional hours and we live off of that, but I dare say that we are living in a time where that's not sufficient. We are capable of producing more than what we get paid from a traditional job. There are so many options and there's such a dearth of knowledge. And most people I talk to have a great deal of knowledge about something that they're passionate about and that I can easily show them in this day and age of how to earn a little bit of extra money based on that knowledge that they have. Information marketing is is a $9 billion business. And even if the information marketing product that I help somebody convert is maybe only $27 a month that there's or $27 a sale, excuse me, that they're selling. That still will buy a whole lot of gadgets and gadgets that people can utilize. And then last but not least is communications. Everything in communications, that's your alternative communications. One of the things that my former husband and I did was we learned Morse code. We could, Morse code through, pounding on the wall. I taught my former husband the language I had learned on my mission for the church that I had served. And we also learned sign language. We also learned code words. So there was a certain name that he hated to be called. So he knew that if ever I called him and I called him by that name, he knew that that meant come home, something's wrong. And I could utilize that as a code word without keying anybody else to it. So there's quite a bit of detail in communication, but what communication also means is communicating with others and utilizing their resources. A lot of times people forget to make friends. We tend to be tight-lipped and closed off when it comes to preparedness. And there's some rationale for that. But one of the greatest assets of preparedness in my world, and it was really the only way I was able to get through the crises that I wasn't prepared for, was the friendships that I had acquired, was the relationships that I had acquired. And that is an important component of communication. All right, that's it. That's the 10 principles of preparedness. If there's a hole that you think that there is, by all means, ask me. I may have skipped over it, but time and time again, there's over 900 studies that as I mentioned, the 900 scenarios that I looked at. And time again, these preparedness components came into play in this particular order. Any questions? Okay, Robin, back to you.
Thank you. I do have one question. I was about to, let me get my camera. For the financial part that you have right there, what do you suggest for when you have older kids that can't do it on their own? I have one kid that's going to school right now, working his tail off, but just cannot even save anything because there's just too much to pay for and stuff. So what are some of the things that you might suggest for that?
Well, so help me understand why the kids, you're just saying they're stuck in a bad job, or what are you saying?
Well, I'm saying that he just doesn't have the money to even start saving anything. Everything that he does have goes to bills or goes to school stuff and rent is getting worse every year, So he always calls me and tells me, I just can't do it anymore. I'm so overwhelmed with everything. And so I just kind of don't know what to tell him because we can't supply money for him either. We're
Sure.
doing the best we can for us. So I just want to kind of know what to say, like how to help him.
In that scenario, it's not a financial crisis, it's a mental crisis. That person is lacking know-how to to be more of an entrepreneur, to create some income for themselves outside of everything else that they're doing. And there are ways. I just finished working with a client last fall who was going to college full time, and we created just a really simple side biz for them that's running online. It runs whether they're, asleep or awake. And they were able to, it wasn't a lot, but it wasn't a lot to work with either, but they were able to generate an additional $800 a month with it. And it was very consistent after 6 months. So typically the financial crises that you're describing goes back to the mental preparedness. There are solutions out there. We live in such a great nation in terms of what we're able to do for capital, to be capitalists and to take advantage of that. We can literally create money from thin air.
I'll have to get with you and see, because like, I think, man, did I not teach you in the whole time you were growing up, but I think part of it is just the whole situation right now of COVID and the fear that
COVID is definitely putting a crimp on people. I mean, all of a sudden, everybody became irrelevant. The people who thought that they were just so stinking important, tweeting their opinions on this scenario and that scenario, even Hollywood became irrelevant. For those first few days, there was just this silence on the planet. Everybody got put in their place to say, okay, guess what? You get to function on your own spiritual preparedness right now, your mental wits, your physical readiness, medical, clothes, everything. Everybody got put in their place. They got a little wake up moment. So I understand that everybody's been thrown a curveball with COVID. But on the other hand, again, mental preparedness. I have a client that I've tripled her income in a year. I mean, that's what I do for my income. I do preparedness for free for the most part. I'm a marketing strategist. It doesn't cost money. It takes information. It just requires knowledge.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have any questions?
I don't know how to unshare my screen. I'm sorry, I don't see that option.
That's okay. I'll let's see. There we go. So
I have a question.
Oh, awesome.
So my question is, what do you recommend for cash on hand?
Did we lose her?
I don't know.
Where'd she go?
She was trying to unshare that screen and maybe she unshared herself.
I don't. Oh. So sorry. I knew it.
That's okay.
So my question was, what do you recommend for cash on hand?
Well, it all depends on what your habits are. What do you need cash for? Do you need it for prescriptions? That's a heck of a lot more cash on hand. You don't need it for food if you're sufficiently prepared. It just depends on where your gaps are in preparedness. Sometimes the financial preparedness can mitigate some of the gaps in our preparedness. But food that's already bought, I teach people to look at their pantry as their own Wall Street, as their own personal Wall Street. Not just the pantry with the food, but like ammo for right now. I couldn't believe I went shooting and I spent $32 for 50 rounds of 9mm. I was just shocked that I could get it, so I was happy about that. And then I went back 7 days later and it was then $39. If if stocking up on what we can when it goes on sale, you're creating your own personal Wall Street. Well, then that leverages your financial. So sorry, I got off track, but the bottom line is there's value in having what you need with the financial. So it depends on where your gaps are in preparedness in terms of cash on hand.
Thank you. That's a good way to think about it.
Anybody else have questions?
Yes, we got a quick question about references and about different books that you would recommend.
Okay, I apologize in advance. I'm a book geek. I love I love to read. I have one room that's just my preparedness library. When you say books, what kind of books? What are you trying to do? Get information, mental preparedness? What are you trying to do?
Mostly on maybe like on fuel. What kind of books do you have that have to do with storing fuel, of different kinds of fuel?
Well, you know, the interesting thing about fuel is I like to look at fuel that doesn't expose me to unnecessary risk. And when I say that, I don't want to have items that require a whole lot of gasoline, for example. I'm a big component in solar. Solar's my fuel. Solar's my oven. Solar's my electricity source. So I'll tell you what I got the most benefit from is I read probably 4 or 5 books. They were fictional, and I'm not typically a fiction reader, but they're just really well done. I read 4 or 5 books that put you in crisis scenarios, like 1 Second After, or Alas Babylon, or Michael Bunker has written a book called The Last Pilgrims. I read those books, and they did a really great job of putting me through the paces. And they covered fuel and alternatives for fuel really well in those books. And then that helped me decide what was good for me, what I wanted to mess with. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, we do have another quick question about
Sure.
you mentioned about the 1 second after and 1 year after, and then
Yes.
there's a lot of others about the EMP and what can we do better prepared? Is there some way to prepare for an EMP like our solar system or other things that our cars? What any of the references about EMPs?
Ted Koppel, while I may not really love him as a newscaster, he wrote a great book called Lights Out, and it's very enlightening, and it's very helpful to understand what the ripple effect is. The reason why I mention his book is because in order to answer your question, you'd find me getting into this lengthy monologue of what the problem really is with if an EMP were to happen. I think most of us here, if we're into preparedness, I think we're primed up and softened up to believe that an EMP is possible, even likely, because it's such an inexpensive option for our enemies. They don't have to worry about cleaning up dead bodies and destroying land with nuclear, fallout. They just, let us fight each other, and then they come in and pick off the remaining few. I mean, it's a really affordable option for our enemies. So it is likely. Now, that being the case, you just have, again, that's the mental preparedness. My webcam is closed, just FYI. It's okay. I'm not pretty to look at. It's all right. I have a face for radio.
You're doing great. Yep. Go ahead.
Anyway, my point is understanding what the ripple effect is with an EMP. There's some things that you're just not going to be able to mitigate unless you want to go to extreme lengths. But guess what? If you were to go to extreme lengths to have a functional car, in the midst of an EMP crisis, well, now you've got a whole other problem. Now you're going to be the target of anybody who has any ammo still stocked up.
Yep, right.
So you've got to consider that ripple effect with an EMP. I feel very well prepared with an EMP. That's another reason why I don't like to do diesel and gas generators, is because I'm going to attract everybody in town with the noise, with the lights. I'd rather be accustomed to utilizing candle. That way I look like everybody else, but, keep my solar generator, private with me, and I can still run this and that in the house. a sun oven, or even knowing how to build a sun oven. That's basic to me, and when it comes to fuel.
Okay, I'm sorry, but we have those books 1 second after, 1 year after, but the other ones that you mentioned,
Alas, Babylon.
Babylon. Okay, and Bunker, what?
Michael Bunker, hang on, Michael Bunker, Last Pilgrims.
Last Pilgrims. Okay,
Yeah, the Last
thank
Pilgrims.
you.
I just read a series with Vanetta Chapman. It's 3 books, and it's not EMP, but it's a solar flare that resulted in the same thing. And she goes through a lot of scenarios. It's fictional, but it's very well written and researched. So.
You know, I even recommend watching your favorite disaster movies. You know, Twister, The Day After Tomorrow. What was it, 2021 or 2012? I get the numbers mixed up. You know, put yourself in that position. Let your mind, in fact, that's really good, because then you have a picture with that mental rehearsal. That's really good, but nothing is as powerful as having physical with the mental rehearsal. Nothing.
That's great. One other quick question about a Faraday cage or Faraday box. Do you think that's important, and how big? We've been trying to get some bigger ones to store ham radios and other things like that, CVs and anything that was electronic, to get into a Faraday box.
Yes, I do think that that is important. I cover Faraday cages on my blog. If you just want to go to preparednesspro.com and put in the search engine Faraday, you'll see the articles come up for that.
Okay, thank you.
Especially if they're going to be, they're not oversized, like, you know, as big as your bedroom. If you're talking about something that's going to carry, you know, vital electronics such as the ham radio and such, I think that's great.
Okay, thank you.
Kellene.
Yes.
One of the things I've seen you before at the Honeyville store. I got a hold of you to get this going. But one of the things I liked about you, whenever you've done the presentations, is about how, you know, like the 3 minutes, and in the first 3 minutes of a disaster, that's where your first, you know, your mental, your spiritual, and your physical are the first 3 things that happen, and everything else kind of falls in afterwards.
Yep. That's
one thing I've really liked about what you presented.
Well, Rona, I don't get to talk at Honeyville stores very often anymore. I'm out of practice. I'm glad you brought that up.
They don't exist anymore out here.
Oh, they don't? Oh, well, that's a shame.
I know that.
Yeah, but I liked how you might want to expand on that too a little bit. How some of, you know, how that everything is just the first 3 minutes, the first 3 minutes, 3 hours,
That's
and how
correct.
You know, your plan goes into that direction.
Yeah, so the first 3 minutes, you are faced with whether or not you have readiness as spiritual, mental, physical, period. Wherever you were sitting and you finally realized the news of COVID, you were either ready in that first 3 minutes with the first 3 principles of preparedness, or you weren't. And you can't go back and fix that. You're already in crisis mode. Now it's not time to read the herbal encyclopedia. Okay, you don't have that luxury. And then the first 3 hours is where everybody else is doing their panicking. That's where your supplies are being depleted dramatically. 3 hours, that's all it takes. If you get to the store because you let yourself slide on XYZ and all of a sudden it was necessary, within that first hour, you're lucky. But anytime after that first hour, in hours 2 and hour 3, now you've subjected yourself to a greater crisis. And that's the crisis that goes into play with people responding to the crises. This happened at 9/11 as well. On 9/11, one of the crises was the traffic that mitigated the arrival of the first responders. I mean, everybody likes to think that we pull over for emergency vehicles, but there were so many vehicles around the World Trade Center just they were either damaged because of falling debris and such, or B, they were just stunned. They couldn't look away, let alone think clearly. So typically a major disaster can be dealt with, but it's the mini disasters around it within that first 3 hours that becomes a greater crisis.
I'm gonna ask about that stuff.
Does anybody else have any more questions?
I'd like to ask a question of you. How many of you feel that there's any holes in the 10 principles? Okay, good.
I think I
They look
like
good.
it that it's principles because principles are encompassing and not so stagnant. Like
Yeah.
anytime you talk about a principle, it's usually in a general, group of something instead of just one thing. So
Well,
that's why I've always liked it, because it's really, and it's about where you're at and what you can do. It's not about doing everything. It's about doing just whatever you can do for that principle. So,
everybody can pursue the first 3 principles, no matter what your budget is, no matter what your body shape is, condition or otherwise. Everybody can pursue the first 3. And if they were to just pursue the first 3, this is scary, folks. You know how ill-prepared people are when it comes to the so-called basics that people think of in terms of preparedness, with food, fuel, water, financial. We know how ill-prepared people are, right? There's only a tiny smidgen of people in the US that actually give 6, 7, and 8, and 9 any consideration, let alone 10. But did you know that if you can be well prepared in 1, 2, and 3, you are already significantly better off. You are already leader quality in a crisis.
We got one more quick question. Do you have time for one more quick answer?
I haven't fallen asleep yet. We're all good.
We get so much information about the COVID and about the mask and about the social distancing that is so, it just blows your mind about how many differences there are. Do you have a reference, the chaos that's going on with what everybody's trying to put out there? And is it medically sound? Do you have any references or anything that we could follow along? Do you have a part of your blog that updates that?
My blog doesn't update that at this time. We're getting ready to do a relaunch this month. Because while I was divorced, I hardly did anything on the blog itself or the YouTube videos. But let me just be bold here and and forget whether or not I'm going to be embarrassed and you guys hate me. I'm going to say something candid here. When it comes to COVID, this is why spiritual preparedness is so important, is because there is so much misinformation. In fact, COVID, in my opinion, is a perfect dress rehearsal for a real crisis. There is so much misinformation. There is so much double talk, inconsistencies, illogic notions that you get confused. And that's part of the stress. That's part of the power of the crises, is not knowing what to believe. If you are spiritually sound, then you have your compass. You can know what to believe. You can know what's right for you. That's what that gut instinct is for. That's what the promptings are for. And that's why that spiritual preparedness is so important. There will be lies abound in any serious crisis. Lies, deception, and just plain foolishness. I'm not saying that everybody has a deceptive heart. Sometimes they mean well, but they just don't think for a living. That's where that spiritual preparedness comes in play, is you've got to know what's true. And it may sound illogical to the rest of the world, but you're not going to have any peace unless you yourself know, well, as for me and my house, this is where we're going to stand. And that's really important.
Thank you. This has been so helpful. We look forward to, you're coming back next week again, aren't you?
No, I hadn't planned on it.
It's been so great. We do appreciate it.
Well, I'm sorry. I know that with you guys already knowing so much that this can be a little dry. The Q&A is when we really get to have fun. And if we could dig down deep on anything, I mean, that's what I did that's what I did for the last 5 years is I actually got to dig down deep on the principles, and that's what we'll start doing. I start a podcast in 2 weeks, which will be Preparedness Pro. It's really nice to be able to listen to the information while you fold your laundry. You don't have to look at a screen. And you can join us on Facebook. I know Facebook is not everybody's cup of tea right now, but you know what? I'm not jumping off just because people are acting like dinglebats. I'm still going to get my information out there. And so between Facebook and the blog and the podcast, we're doing our best to get information out there right now.
If you find any big sales on bullets, you'll be sure and let us know, okay?
I did actually. I was on my Facebook page. I let people know I found ammo, and it was going, I mean, this was great under the circumstances. It was 62 cents a round. No, 52 cents a round. And I have 45,000 followers on Preparedness Pro. And before the 5th comment got posted, they were sold out.
Oh my goodness. Was this 9mm or what was this?
9 and 20 gauge and 40.
Okay.
Where was it?
Sportsmansguide.com.
Okay. Yeah, we do have that, so that's great. Well, thanks again.
My
Just
pleasure,
keep on
Eric.
looking. All right.
Thank you so much, Kellene. It's been just a wonderful evening and lots of information. So for all of you who I don't know, if you could, here, I'll put my email in the chat so you can email me so I can get you on the list. Because I won't know how to send you the next link if I don't hear from you. So please email me to let me put you on the list, because I have the information about the financial stuff for financial week, the end of April, the shakeout activity that we're coming up, and then oh, amateur radio is also doing some classes coming up. Are you still on, Roland? I don't see ya. So I can send those things out to everybody. And please share this information that you're learning with your friends and neighbors and family, because really we are a community and we need to help each other out and work together, because really it's who you're next to, that's who you're gonna be with in whatever crisis. It was my family for COVID, you know, and I love them to death, although I'm wishing I could get out more. But
Are we going to have
better.
more, are we going to have more in-person meeting? Are you getting in contact, not just Zoom?
No, not
soon?
yet. Our emergency manager has said we need to still do this probably till May or June to do it virtually. And actually it's doing really good, because anybody from anywhere, so if you even have family from other states or whatever, they can join in with us and learn. So right now virtual has actually been a blessing. So I'm kind of liking it, and I can't be in person anymore because I'm in Idaho now. So
Oh, goodness.
What are you doing in Idaho, Robin?
we moved, and I don't know why yet, but it just happened so quickly, and it was amazing that we even got a house, because it's just as crazy here trying to get a house as it is in Utah, you know, but we just felt we needed to, and here we are. And we still have to do church virtually here, so we haven't met very many people, and it's really hard to get to know your neighbors, because it's like you go over and, you know, and you can't really get to know anybody behind a mask either. So but
Yep,
we're here, and it's actually been a good growing experience. And so, and I still am doing my job, only through virtual. So our shakeout exercise is actually going to be a virtual exercise with the businesses and churches, and work on communication and the disaster assessment. So if you want more information, please let me know, because we're focusing on the businesses and churches of Tooele County, but really anybody can participate with us. So we'd be more than happy to have your information for our exercise on the shakeout day. So
Robin, I'm thinking fast. It's after 10 here, so I'm going to leave you guys, okay?
okay, thank you so much. I so appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That's
Have a great evening.